I have clicked onto the Global Tropical Overview for May the 27th, 2024. As is always the case in these videos, feel free to express your mind alone, and in making any decisions ahead of any tropical cyclones, look towards your local office, local emergency management, and local tropical cyclone warning center. So we have our same two systems active across the eastern hemisphere today. Western hemisphere is all quiet. We've got tropical cyclone Remal here, now moving inland over India and Bangladesh, dumping a ton of rainfall across this region, and will continue to do that as we go throughout the next couple of days in this week. And for those in the zone of where the system's dumping all this heavy rain, make sure you're still staying weather aware, and I will leave once again links to all the local weather offices for Myanmar, India, and Bangladesh here as the system continues to move inland. But we're not going to talk about this one really all too much anymore, as it's already inland. The forecasting phase is pretty much done. We're going to focus purely today on tropical cyclone, or not tropical cyclone, I'm still stuck in the southern hemisphere, but this is Typhoon Ewiniar here east of Luzon. And yeah, that's a typhoon already, having just come offshore this morning or last night local time in the Philippines. But you can see it there. It's a very tiny storm, which is to be expected for rapidly intensifying like this. Smaller storms can be more easily able to intensify quickly like this compared to big systems. We sort of have that shown here in both storms that we have active right now, with Remal being big, Ewiniar being small. Now the system, like I said, made landfall yesterday morning, and over the nighttime hours, it came offshore, and now it is sitting here east of Luzon. And this is a good sign for intensification if you want a strong storm. As we talked about yesterday, how the main thing governing that was going to be the interaction with Luzon. Did it come offshore and get its ocean time that it's getting today, or did it stay just onshore and interact with land much longer than it has in reality? But you can see it here. The eye is right about there, very small little compact system there with deep convection wrapping around that eye and building an eye wall structure. You can see that here on a microwave pass that we got sometime in the middle of the night, and you can see this strong convection wrapping around. Now, we did have a newer one that came out after this. I believe it was 3 hours after this one, and I couldn't find it, but it had shown the potential that there's a bit of banding around the inner eye wall. So potentially stuff like this. You can sort of see some of the semblance of it here, maybe something here as well, where we had some outer bands around the inner eye wall. And that will be something to watch for the next, say, day or two as the system tracks northeast. This could preclude an eye wall replacement cycle, and what happens in those cycles is the inner eye will be surrounded by an outer ring of strong thunderstorms, and over the time of that process, the inner core will die out. The eye will get larger as it begins to have that outer ring of thunderstorms take over, and that ring will eventually contract and become the new eye wall. And in that process, the storm can weaken, but overall it enlarges in size. Now, the good news is for impacts to land, after the Philippines, the impacts to land are going to pretty much end for this, apart from, say, some surf impacts in Japan and Taiwan. The system is forecast to stay well east of Japan, especially the Japanese islands. Now, going towards mainland Japan, there may be more impacts, but by then it will be turning into a non-tropical low. For the Philippines, though, as it pulls away, you can see in the visible satellite imagery, compared to yesterday when it was sitting over the Philippines, we've now got much more of a northeasterly component to the steering flow. And this is as a result that we have a large trough aloft digging into this region. You can see it here, very large trough, multiple lobes of low pressure within it. And this is now digging into the South China Sea, and this is pulling the system towards the north. And this is really going to be what's steering it from here on out for the foreseeable future as it tracks northeast towards Japan. And it also may set up the environment a little bit better for intensification. But as it pulls away, we still do expect some impacts in the Philippines. You can see Pagasa's current signal warning map having signal 2 warnings along the east central coast of Luzon, as the system could still get a little close there, but elsewhere signal 1 warnings in place for much of those districts there in Luzon and areas south. But in terms of the intensity forecast, the system's already got a really good start. We thought that the system may struggle a bit more because it had that land interaction. It dealt with some high topography over the central Philippines, but it seems to be doing really well for itself. Now, there is a couple of factors that may hold the system back a little bit. One thing about Ewiniar is it is fairly small, so it is susceptible to environmental conditions, and much more so than larger systems, I should say there. Uh, and we are going to have some increasing shear. You can see this here in this water vapor loop again. If we go here, we've got this upper low on the base of this trough digging in, and you can see there's some westerly flow aloft now entering the South China Sea, and you can see it's already starting to impinge upon the storm. If you look at this outflow channel here, this is now being just pushed off towards the east as this trough digs in. This is now perhaps trying to put a little bit of westerly shear upon the system. Now, you can see on the GFS as this comes in, this is not going to be a very strong westerly shear. Modeled soundings only have this about 10 or 15 knots, but it is something to monitor as the system is very compact, and these compact systems can be very susceptible to wind shear. Another thing to watch for is potential for downsloping is what it's called. We have a bit of high terrain here over Luzon, and downsloping is basically where a tropical cyclone will pull some of that air down the sides of a mountain, and as it does that, it will dry out that air, and that's a common source of dry air intrusion. Think about storms near Madagascar or Hispaniola in the Atlantic, the Madagascar being in the Indian Ocean. That's a common way that dry air can get entrained into these systems, and that's something to watch for. Just see if it happens. Now, if that does happen, that could heavily impact the intensification, because the system may have gone up pretty quickly, but being so small and susceptible to shear and dry air, it can easily go down real quick. And that will be something to watch for. Now, with that shear, I should mention that, and you can see this in the water vapor loop, we're going to have a jet streak set up, an area of very strong winds aloft over Eastern Asia. And this is going to likely aid in the expansion of a poleward outflow channel. You can see we've already sort of got one here north of the system. This is part of an upper high that's draped a little bit east of the storm, also contributing to an equatorward outflow channel. But as this outflow channel more connects with this jet streak, we're going to be getting a more favorable poleward outflow channel as the system tracks northeast. You can see it here, that this jet streak here, this entrance region as it's called, where the flow is accelerating aloft, that orients itself better with the outflow from the area of high pressure aloft above the storm. And this may provide enough of forcing to, I don't know if forcing is the right word, but it acts to balance the wind shear. So you have stronger divergence, you can balance it to where the wind shear does not have as strong of an effect on the tropical cyclone. This is a fascinating thing to watch with jet interactions. It's some of the most fascinating things you can see for a tropical cyclone. But that could be a scenario where, even though we have increasing shear, the jet interaction helps negate some of the impacts of that shear, and it's able to intensify regardless. And the ocean temperatures are certainly favorable. This is the ocean heat content map for today, and you can see this is basically, by the way, showing how far down with depth does the warm waters at the surface extend. You can have very warm water at the surface, but it can also not extend too far down with depth. But one thing that's important for major hurricanes and major typhoons like this is it needs to be able to churn up the water and have warm water underneath that to sustain itself. And Ewiniar is going to have plenty of that. You can see values over 50 here, showing a decent amount of ocean heat content as it moves northeast. Now, importantly, once it gets past this line, it's also where the sea surface temperatures die down east of the southern Japanese islands. That will likely be when it starts to weaken. But if it can find itself in an environment that is not too strongly sheared and it doesn't get any dry air, the environment here will likely favor this system intensifying pretty significantly. And we could get something, some models are trying to suggest that we could get a super typhoon out of this. And of course, that's natural this time of year. We do usually get a super typhoon at, say, or at least a stronger typhoon at least, this time of year as we go into May, June, and July. And of course, like I said, impacts are going to be really kept offshore here. We're not expecting any land impacts in Japan, Taiwan, or the Philippines once the system tracks northeast. And you can see that here in Pegasus forecast cone, keeping it as a typhoon as it heads northeast, staying away from land areas here, and we could again have a very strong peak within here. Now, once it does go up towards Japan, as I mentioned, we could get some more impacts there. You can see the low tracking like this, and this could absolutely bring impacts here. And I can probably go to simulated infrared satellite. Yeah, you can see as it comes up there and turns non-tropical, we've got some scattered thunderstorms and showers up there in Japan, and that could be more of a non-tropical impact for this. In terms of impacts while it's a tropical cyclone, we're not looking at any more significant ones after the Philippines. That's all that I've got for today. Stay safe in the Philippines as the system pushes away from the coast, and I'll have more videos throughout the course of this week. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.